Hey, this is Mo Lunsford at Union Grove Lumber Studios.
And this is the Shed Geek. We want to welcome you to today's episode.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Shed Geek podcast. And on this cold day, as we were just saying, at least I know it's cold here in Illinois, Vance. I would imagine that it's cold in Oklahoma too. But you know what? Maybe there's some warm hearts around the country today. I don't know. We'll get into some of that discussion. Why don't you do me a favor? Some folks may know you, but for those who don't, do you just care to introduce yourself, your company, and a little bit about who you are and what you guys do?
Yes, hello out there. I'm Vance Wright, and been involved with a little shed company called Better Barns since about 2002. We not only build sheds, we also put up a lot of metal buildings, and as many other folks in the shed industry, we also, sell the little carports, those kinds of things. So it's kind of who I am. And
so a lot of folks may know your partner in crime, or at least one of them. I don't know exactly the makeup of the company, but Tyler, who has been on the episode, I've been on a couple different episodes of the Shed Geek podcast, and was sort of a long-term columnist there in Shed Builder magazine, now Shed Business Journal, and kind of didn't coin the phrase, but certainly used the phrase that he had known for years: a rising tide lifts all boats. That was kind of a bit of inspiration for me early on in our approach to the shed industry through the podcast, trying to better the industry as a whole and not just individually. This focus that we were sort of better together.
Yes. Tyler and I have worked together building sheds since before he was a part of my family. So,
okay,
in the early days, I was building sheds and selling sheds and delivering sheds. A little bit of support from my father on the delivery side, and then Tyler came to work for me. Still in high school, in fact, at 17 years old. So, a lot of history together. Maybe today would help some of you folks that are able to see the video content on this, put a face with the name on some of Tyler's stories. So yeah, a lot of interesting times there.
A lot of interesting stories too. I read his columns, regularly, and bought his book. And yeah, it's always nice whenever he would talk about Vance. But I got a chance to meet you at the Oklahoma barbecue, the event that they have out there each year, and it was kind of nice to put a face with the name. So and then the makeup to some extent of the company, I believe, if I understand correctly, Tyler is married to your sister. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You guys would be brothers-in-law.
That's correct.
And I just want to call attention to that before we get too deep in that conversation. And your sister and Tyler's bride is kind of going through a bit of a hard time, to say the least. I don't want to expand on that. It's sort of a personal matter. I just, what he puts out socially, I feel like I can kind of touch on that. But she's had, do I understand right that she had a tumor or something along those lines on her brain, if I understand correctly?
Yes, she had a form of brain cancer, if you will.
And she's doing better now, I believe.
Yes, she's currently in about the middle of a 6-week stint of radiation treatments 5 days a week. So yeah, she's doing much better. Had a surgery and they removed the tumor. And so seems to be responding to the chemo and radiation well, exceptionally well, in fact, in terms of that's not affecting her, like it does some folks with the sickness and such. We feel some of those are probably God things, and we're grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
brain cancer is not fun. I told Tyler in a conversation a few weeks ago, early on, he just kept calling it a brain tumor. And Tyler and I are very close personally. So I told Tyler it's a lot easier to say brain tumor than cancer, isn't it?
Mm.
So that's really, what it is.
Yeah, that's a powerful statement. We didn't go through near what you guys are going through, but we did go through 6 rounds of chemo as well. With my wife with breast cancer, and she got the brain fog and definitely got a lot of the sickness. And it's almost when we go back to the doctor, it's I believe in PTSD because I could almost just see it on my wife's face and her reaction to the smells, the environment, the people. And she's, we're lucky. She's survived and cancer free now and has been for quite some time. But been having a lot of interesting conversations lately with people who, talking about the things like this, here lately between medicines, vaccinations, things in our food, and these conversations they stay in my mind in that mess up here in my head where I try to sit and figure out the world's problems like everybody else, right? And
Yes.
I remember really leaning into God on this, and I got to tell you, my wife was a trooper, buddy. Women are much stronger than men. I continue to make the joke that I heard made several years. It says, "Why would women constantly fight for equality? They're definitely taking a step down if they want to be equal to men." in my in my opinion, my
They have a
wife seemed,
wonderful place.
they do. My wife just seemed to just go through it better than I did, and she put on a really good face, if not, but she's just excellent. And it's pretty amazing what, yeah, just watching her. I just want you to know that, your sister and Tyler to know his wife is in our thoughts and our prayers. I don't know her personally. We possibly have met when we were out there and introduced to Tyler in Oklahoma or yourself, but we try to use the show for what it is. And although it'll be a while before this one goes out, we would just call on the listeners to stop where they are today and say a prayer and keep them in your thoughts. And yeah, I just really wanted to address the sensitivity of that because while we don't understand it completely, we do understand it to some extent. But anyone can be a prayer warrior today for
Absolutely.
healing and peace.
Introducing ShedHub, your ultimate shed marketplace. Are you in the shed business and looking to connect with more buyers? Look no farther than ShedHub. ShedHub is a game-changing, two-sided marketplace that brings shed sellers and buyers together in one easy-to-use platform. Think of it as the Amazon of sheds. ShedHub isn't just any ordinary marketplace. It's a powerhouse that ranks on the first page of Google's search results in 91% of U.S. cities. With over 1.2 million impressions on our website last month alone, ShedHub is where you want to be to showcase your sheds to a wider audience. And here's the best part. For a limited time, you can join our exclusive Next 500 plan for just $39 per month. Simply head over to geek.shedhub.com to sign up and start attracting more shoppers to your shed listings. As the Shed Geek, I am here to endorse ShedHub and invite you to join me on this journey to boost your shed business. Whether you're struggling with website visibility or simply want more eyes on your product, ShedHub has got you covered. Don't miss out on this opportunity. to supercharge your shed sales. Visit geek.shedhub.com today and make your mark in the shed industry with ShedHub.
What I want to know is how you got started in the shed industry. Did you fall into this? Are you a second generation builder? What was the appeal that kind of made you want to build sheds?
Well, like so many of us, it was a family connection there to begin with. So currently we're in Oklahoma. I think we said that just to be clear. But prior to that, we lived in New Mexico, a little place called Hobbs. And my father was in the construction and roofing business. So done an immense amount of insurance repair work, those kinds of things. And the way the shed deal started, we had another family member in another state who had built sheds for one of the lumberyard owners, as at least here in the Midwest, many towns had that. The lumber company would build sheds out of their coal stuff. And so he had moved to the state and was working for my dad at the time. And really, it was kind of just an off day. We'd build a shed out of leftover material. You have enough 2x4s left over from a remodel, and you build a 10x16 shed when the weather's bad. You're not working. So that's kind of the way that started. And then I was introduced to it at a very young age. I don't even know when I first started working. It must have been 10 or 11 years old, probably. I built my first shed by myself when I was 12. I can distinctly remember that, a little 8x12 lofted barn. I'm sure many of you can relate to that, little red and white guy. So that's kind of how I got a start. And I've loved the industry ever since. I love seeing the joy it brings to customers. I love seeing sorry, I don't remember the gentleman's first name, but he worked for Atlas Buildings down in Northeast Texas. He had been a sales rep for them for many years. He told me something I've never forgotten about the industry. He said, I love the variety or the wide spectrum that the shed customers bring to me each day. He said, this morning I may be selling a half dozen 12x32 buildings to someone who owns a ranch for bunkhouses. And this afternoon, I may be selling a 10x16 dream home to someone else. So
That's interesting. I like
thought
that.
about that a lot of times, how wide the gamut is for the customer base.
It is certainly an interesting take on it. I've never really heard it put into those terms. There's someone I want to mention just out of curiosity. Can't be too many people in Hobbs building in New Mexico building sheds for years, but I can only assume that this gentleman did. And I really wanted to see Hobbs when I drove through New Mexico on our way back last year, and plan to make a trip back out at some point. But there's a fella named Jeff Sage. I don't know if that rings a bell by any stretch of the imagination.
He's my uncle.
Jeff is your uncle.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, but all roads lead to Rome, sounds like.
That's right. That's
in
right.
that respect.
So
that's who taught me to build sheds.
I couldn't be happier to know that, because Jeff, and I'm going to call him today, just because I interviewed you, I'm going to give him a call. Jeff sort of knows what I do, but not exactly. But here's what I do know about Jeff. He is definitely one of the early influential people in my shed world. Now, I had been in the shed industry long before, got out, did some ministry work and faith-based drug addiction and alcohol recovery, as some of you may know. But Jeff was hauling for a company that we were selling for, and we just hit it off so well. So well. He's so pleasant, very likable, and he was a bit of a character to me. I don't know. So I've used Jeff as inspiration even for some of my commercials early on and things like that for the podcast. But Jeff has, and I'm gonna embarrass myself, maybe him and you and others along with this. But Jeff definitely has this. What I used to like to laugh and joke about was um, almost this old timey when you show up. Here, I'll embarrass myself. I would always tease, and I would always say, if Jeff, if if I call him on the phone, this is what I'm going to hear. Shannon, you old dog. What are you doing? What are you doing calling me on a Wednesday? And it doesn't matter the day. He would say any, and I'm telling you, he's infectious. His personality is, and I just enjoyed being around him. And he was an excellent hauler. He went on to build. I went and saw him in Oklahoma or in Arkansas when he was down there for a while. And you talk about a guy who's really been through it. I know he lost his wife, and I was there in a couple of those conversations. And, you know, I've always thought so much of him. And he used to tell me about this magical place called Hobbs, New Mexico, where he built sheds for 25 years. But I've always just known him from my little piece of the world. But I want to say publicly, I really enjoy, and I'm embarrassed I haven't called him in so long and talked to him. I almost ought to call him on the podcast one day and just tell him he's on it, just so y'all can get a kick out of him. But I want to say, really, really enjoy the guy. So what a mentor for you to grow up under. Love Jeff, great guy.
Yeah, going down just a little different path. Don't know how far you want to go down this path, but one thing Jeff always told me, you know, the whole building side is a lot different than where I function today. But he always told me when we were building sheds, he said, if you had 100 carpenters in this room, there would be 101, at least 101 ways of doing this. And most of them are going to be good.
That's pretty good. Yeah. He's like, you know, it's funny because, you know, you hear the name Sage, and that's kind of synonymous with knowledge and understanding in itself. And Jeff has just always sort of been one of those guys to me that when he talks, I listen. And he just, to me, he's always, he will be the first, I'm sure, to tell you he's imperfect, but to me he's always been this. I don't know. I miss him already. I'm going to call him today just because we got a chance to interview you, and you're his nephew and protege. And
that little saying that he shared with me has helped me understand through the years that your way is not the only way. So,
are you ready to elevate your shed business to new heights? Your pathway to success just got a whole lot smoother with ShedSuite's innovative marketing platform. At ShedSuite, we like to think we understand the shed industry at least a little bit. And over the last 7 years, we've been building awesome software for shed businesses. We focus first on building easy-to-use software to help you create and track orders, like the point of sale and after the sale order fulfillment. And now we're excited to announce our full-feature CRM, all things pre-sale, you know, like prospecting and follow-up, all to empower your shed company to market better and sell more efficiently. Our platform empowers you with a marketing toolkit designed to amplify your online presence, engage your audience, and drive sales like never before. Enjoy the ease of conversion tracking, email marketing, centralized lead communication, and so much more. Oh, and guess what? It even comes with an iPhone and an Android app. With ShedSuite's marketing platform, crafting and deploying effective marketing campaigns is a breeze. The advanced reporting functionality allows your team to analyze real-time conversion data so you can make informed decisions and watch your business flourish. There's no better time than now to join the community of shed business owners who are scaling up with ShedSuite. It's time to turn your marketing efforts into real trackable results. Visit shedsuite.com/marketing to get pricing, explore the features, and book a demo. ShedSuite is committed to building top quality software to empower your shed business to thrive.
I don't remember what I was talking about the other day, and I'll be vulnerable here a little bit. I want to say we were talking about finance or rent to own or something, and I don't want to get anybody's feathers, like, in a tizzy or whatever. But, I think I said something because I saw it on a meme on Facebook the other day, and it said, it was talking about churches. And I've been talking a little bit about recently some vulnerabilities of my own about, the struggles in the church, or with people in the church so much. So it's always God's children. It's never God himself I struggle with. But I said, I saw one that said, hey, it's okay if you started going to another church. You don't have to completely dismiss us. We're not in gangs. And I would make the argument that it's with that in the shed industry. If you're using another company, we don't have to not like you. Or maybe Vance, maybe you guys switch to another lumber company or another metal supplier or whatever it is. We don't have to hate each other. We're not in gangs. And I just like that. I feel like that kind of echoes the sentiments of like my personal feelings about how business should be done in today's world. But it is a struggle. It is a struggle because these are ways to make a living, and those become very difficult conversations. But you and Jeff are 100% right. There's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say. So, um, you know, appreciate that conversation for sure. And I would have not guessed we'd be talking about Jeff today, but that's awesome. I also want to stop
Me
and
either.
I'll give a quick shout out because look, I wore an Innovations Manufacturing and shirt the other day, and they sent me a hoodie. And I'll tell you what, I didn't know it was that simple to get a hoodie, and I appreciate it from those guys because it's 6 degrees here in Illinois right now. But I want to give shout out to WEH Supply and my guys over there in Pennsylvania, Bill and his family, Carly, and just the whole group. I noticed it just now paying attention, and I want to give them a quick shout out during the podcast. Um, Listen, the shed industry is a weird creature. Where do you think the state of the industry is right now, Vance? Like, what would your opinion be versus when you got in years ago to now a much more seasoned veteran? A lot of people listen to the podcast because they don't just like to hear stories about Jeff and where things have come and wholesome entertainment, but they also get value from the conversations, or we try to bring at least valuable content. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on where it sits right now. What's your grand view of it?
Well, frankly, our current business, it relies less on sheds than it used to. So I said we do a lot of steel buildings, a lot of construction even, and have our own fleet of dirt equipment. So I don't apply myself 100% to just the shed industry anymore. But one thing I find very interesting is the maturity of the financing options within the industry. At least to some degree, the rent to own the last few years has driven the industry, in my view. And we do our
Mm-hmm.
own rent to own in house. In terms of profit margins and those kinds of things, the rent to own is very attractive. And it's very interesting to me to see that. Well, I told a banker last week that I was visiting with, it looks to me like the RTO companies have matured to a place they are doing their own financing, which is honestly, from my view, what the whole concept of RTO was birthed from, was a need for financing for buildings. So I find that to be a very interesting development.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you're selling sheds, typically I think you start with cash is king. Would you agree? From a because the question is, what level of involvement as a shed salesperson do you play in the financial development of somebody's personal expenses? In other words, I was the world's worst, right? I was not always the best salesperson because I thought I could spend their money better than they could spend their money, or you at least would occasionally identify what you felt like was a young couple might not be making the best financial decision. And for me, that was very imperative because my family did those things, right? And then me and my wife went down that road for quite some time to where we got stuck in debt and different things. And you begin, I spent a small time selling insurance and being a financial planner. So there's something at least a little bit in my bones that kind of told me, hey, I want to watch out for people as well too. And that's very conflicting whenever you're attempting to sell somebody something that you might not purchase. That might be a decision that you might not make. And I think to myself, you're 100% right. I would almost make the argument that rent to own has sort of ruled the roost, if you will, to some extent in the development of the shed industry over the past 10 years, perhaps as much so that we have 50% of all sales that are being made today are made because of the addition of rent to own, whereas traditional finance maybe it just hasn't quite hit the industry quite as hard. And personally, even as a rent to own provider, I'd love to see finance be more competitive in the space because I think that if you want to see your customer win, then you want to see them win, even if it means you have to change your business model at times to match what the customer needs. And I love to see. So what are your thoughts? Are you excited to see the competitiveness of the rent-own industry? Does it burden you? Does it sadden you? Are you excited to see the financing options come a little bit more to the table? Do we need more of that? What's your overall thoughts on it?
My overall thoughts on it, I don't know how it's going to affect the industry. A few things I have noticed is, just in general, at least in our area, the expectation of the cash buyer is they expect to find a repo in a deal. So it has at least somewhat dampened retail pricing for your cash buyers. So essentially what I see happening is your RTO buyers end up subsidizing your cash buyers in terms of profit margins internally. As you know, as a rent-to-own provider, many of the rent-to-own providers actually pay a premium to the manufacturer for that contract or that building, which is really nothing more than the payment buyer is subsidizing the cash buyer in the big picture. So I think it's very interesting how repressive it has been to retail pricing, and just a very interesting dynamic to me personally. Well, I don't know if more of the profit margins end up shifting back to the manufacturing side with the advent of financing, or just what happens. But what you pointed out is I've struggled with the very same thing. I want to serve you with excellence and transparency, and I don't think rent to own is a great option for many, 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 many people.
There's definitely there's still a mix, I think, of opinions. I remember my initial introduction to RTO, and my initial introduction to it, I feel like I responded the way most people do, and I was not the biggest fan. Was it predatory?
Sure.
Of course not. I didn't think it was
No.
predatory because I didn't think that they were attempting to. It wasn't like the SNL, scandal in the 80s where, people have to have a home to live in, which you could make the argument, sheds are people's homes in a lot of cases, even though the contracts on the rent to own clearly state that you can't live in it. I think one of the biggest problems there is depending on who your partner is.
Here at Identigrow, we have been providing custom nameplates for the shed and furniture industry for over 20 years. We are so pleased to know that shed manufacturers see the value in expressing their shed brand to potential customers using an Identigrow nameplate. When you add an attractive decal to your product, you will more than pay for the cost with increased sales. Clients will not only be able to identify the shed brand, but it will help to brand and advertise to potential customers who can easily see the nameplate, and in many cases, find a phone number or website to shop for themselves. At Identigrow, we are happy to continue to serve and invite you to visit our website at identigrow.com or give us a call at 540-283-9193. You can even fax us at 540-283-9194 or visit our website by clicking on the Shed Geek newsletter and then simply fill out some basic information for a free catalog or free samples. Thank you, Shed Industry, for allowing us to serve you in identifying your sheds. Identigrow. Identify your products. Grow your business.
I got a chance to speak at a dealer event the other day, and through a marketing presentation, and I talked about the commitment from the company to the dealer, the consignment dealer specifically. They have 70 or 80 dealers, and I asked the question, what is your commitment to your company, to your provider? Because it seems like with the consignment, and I'm not saying all, I'm saying this is probably just a small sample, but there's enough for it to address, is that arguably the manufacturers who want to grow, and one of the ways they grow is through a dealer network, they get the funding and then they throw a bunch of inventory out there, and there's not a whole lot of training that happens with their salespeople. They find 5 acres open, they throw 200,000 in inventory on there. Hey, you get your percentage, but there's not a selling with an expectation of a retail partner, that you would see in most other industries. Net 30, net 60, net 90, floor planning, wholesale purchase. It's hey, sell the low hanging fruit, operate as a billboard for our company. It's a good place to bring our repos back to. Right now we have a security net for whenever sheds don't sell. But is there ever any training, not only about the company and sheds and carpentry and all these different things, but also what it means to be compliant with RTO? And maybe, because everyone's approved, it's easy to just be like, come on in. It doesn't matter who buys. Doesn't matter if it's a good or bad decision for you. My job is to sell and get that commission. And sometimes the lucrativeness of that commission, selling 2 or 3 buildings a week at 10%, far outweighs any risk necessary to learn or to even educate your customer. Now, with that being said, we're telling people how to spend their money, Vance. You know what I mean? It becomes very difficult when it's like, well, hey, we're offering them a solution when no one else will, albeit we view that solution, some might view that solution as this is a more expensive route to go down, as opposed to just saving your money, paying cash, doing a traditional finance with simple interest. Where do we draw the line on, I'd rather not offer that because that's a bad deal for you, versus, well, someone needs to offer it, so it might as well be me.
Right. Very interesting conversation. So, again, I'll point you back to what I said. I'd love to hear some comments and some feedback on this, because it's just my opinion and it's worth what it costs you. But it looks like to me the whole concept of rent to own really was birthed from a need for financing. And, it's like I told that banker last week. I know I get the whole concept of titling something, but banks, credit unions, anywhere will loan you money on a car in a moment that's going down the road, getting tore up, beat up, girlfriend putting her window, or foot through the windshield or whatever. And, shed is far more unlikely to be damaged or lost or moved. And so I think that's a very interesting concept on the whole
I would,
finance world. And I do understand the marketing angle on the rent to own. It is a logical solution to the problem of long-term storage rent and not owning anything ever. I'm not saying it doesn't have its place, but I'm not real sure that's honestly where it was birthed from, if we were to just tell the truth. I know for us internally, we tried partnering with several different financial institutions to offer financing before we started doing RTO internally. And the real reason we done that is because no one would offer financing on the shed. That's really the core of it.
do you think that there is influence from within the rent to own world that would, suggest some kind of like cause as to why traditional financing institutions wouldn't take on the risk of a secured or even non-secured loan of a shed?
I have no idea.
I think, I mean, my answer to that would be no, but I can also be naive. I'm fine with being naive. I'd rather be naive, than to ignore the truth, right? So I don't, because I think that would be a really hard thing to pull off. And instead,
Yes.
what my opinion seems to be is, um, look, when we jumped into rent to own, we were kind of forced into it because I do believe that there's influence there in rent to own, and we kind of noticed it in the marketing world. So we almost had to be able to protect our marketing clients by offering rent to own, so that we could offer a solution that was all in one. Well, next thing you know, that took us into finance. But then the question came up on the table: do we jump into POS and 3D? And we've had opportunities to partner, and we've turned those down, and we're thankful for those opportunities. But we just try to promote those companies through traditional advertising on the podcast.
Are you a dealer who sells multiple products at your shed lot? Are you tired of sifting through clunky or overcomplicated softwares to simply sell a product? If so, it's time to call Cal. Consumer Aligned Logistics is the affordable, simplified, and scalable solution for your shed, carport, or even RTO company. We are partnered with Identigrow and Shed Pro for configurators and have multiple RTO partners to choose from JMag to Heartland to Shed Geek Rentals and Scott's RTO. And if your partner isn't listed here, just ask. We are happy to add more. Give us a call at 425-359-3279 or visit calcanhelp.com. That's CALCANHELP.com.
Loudest voices against dealer premiums here a couple of years ago. And I found it interesting. I almost want to be careful what I say here, because I found it interesting to see people flip-flop their position, people who are very prominent on whether or not a dealer premium is a good thing, from one year to the next, to go from saying it's I don't care to the next year saying, or first year saying it's a terrible idea, quit doing it, to the next year saying I really don't care if you do it or not. It's just a market thing. What we did was took a different approach. I definitely tried to use the power of creativity, and I don't always get it right, but I can tell you this: if we were going to offer a premium, the approach that we took was, how can I do this in a way that you can't infiltrate a customer by simply paying them more money? Because, man, that low-hanging fruit is really, and we're getting deep here now. We got deep real quick, but that low-hanging fruit of that little bit of money can sometimes like blindside you to like other opportunity. And I'm interviewing you, but I'll break this down here. My thoughts. So tell me to shut up at any time, and you start talking. That's no problem with me. I think if you are in marketing, whether you're Coca-Cola or whether you're Harley Davidson or whether you're Better Buildings, we suggest, because experts suggest, that at least 4% of your total revenue be applied towards your marketing concept. Now, that's your overall marketing concept. And some of the aggressive guys go 8%, 9%, but just a minimal. Well, that just so happens to kind of mimic a little bit about what you're seeing in the dealer premium world, right? Like an average of 5% kickback on your sales. So we took our premium, and our primary suggestion is to find out the nature of the company by offering a premium solution that is a marketing solution for you. In other words, if you're going to apply that, why don't you just apply the money that we're going to give you through a kickback towards your marketing? And now a marketing company would have to come in and outserve us. They can outpay us because there's way bigger companies than us out there. They can come in and just offer you a 6%, 7%, 8%. I've heard 9%. And in my head, I can't help but wrap myself around how much yield is rent-to-own making that you could possibly give back 9%. And do you want to win business that bad? And me and I know other companies have said, we won't go there. There's not enough to give away. I can't give you enough to be my customer. And when it's that competitive, it probably needs shaking up. But what we have done to shake up our end is said, we're going to offer you something more than money. You give $1 million in rent to own and you get a $50,000 check back at the end of the year. Let's take that 50 grand, dump it in your marketing, and let's take your sales from 2 million to 4 million. And now it has residual effect because now you get better lumber prices. Now you get an opportunity to grow as a company. And wouldn't you rather have your yield coming from your sales as opposed to a spiff off of your rent to own? Like, don't you want to actually grow your business? And then there's other traps. Traps is the wrong word. I'm not trying to get in trouble here with anyone, but purchasing inventory. We've done it and I don't like it, to be honest with you. I don't really like, look, if you go to the bank and you ask for a loan, and you got me fired up already, Vance, I'm sorry. If you go to the bank and ask for a loan, guess what they want back? They want their money back with interest. Well, I mean, that's just generally speaking, that's why they loan you money. But RTO probably wants some influence and wants to. So I'm gonna get myself in trouble today. But I've been a little bit unhinged here lately, so it's fine. I'll defend myself for anybody who wants to come on and challenge the opinion. But I do believe that it is very influential to the point of influencing banks. I don't know about that, but it is definitely influential in the industry.
I wasn't insinuating that I think banks are being blackmailed by our little small rent-to-own companies or our big ones, either one. But I do think it's very interesting. Like you pointed out, I think it's possible that even the manufacturers and the sales lots at times have lost track of truly serving the client that walks through their door, charging a rate that is adequate to maintain me being able to serve you long term. And some of that attention has turned toward, I've got to make sure the rent to own company is happy and fed.
Ooh. What a powerful statement.
When really the core of the reason a rent to own even exists is because of a lack of financing for the shed industry in the beginning, in its early stages.
I feel like you and me are both gonna get fan mail and hate mail alike. But I agree.
Quite possible.
but I agree. I do. Here's, for me, it's probably the influence that matters most. It's the same as when a company says, calls me and says, I want to go to work with this guy. What's your thoughts? They're going to buy a shed company for me. And the only thing I got to do is give them my rent to own and got to give it to them for years and this, that, and another. So, well, what's the difference in that and a bank? I mean, look, I have a truck out here in the driveway, which is to say that the bank has a truck that they loan me every month as long as I make my payments until they're made. And it's arguably the same if you purchase a company, the bank will own it. But if the rent-own company owns that then you essentially work for the rent-own company. You disguise it in owning a shed company, but not for 30 years until you pay for it, because your decisions aren't always your decisions. And that's why I believe in contracts, but I'm also very careful about what I sign nowadays. And I'm trying to stop. I want to pull us almost back a little bit and look at what
Sure.
the bigger picture of this really means. And I think the point you're trying to make is that it's influential, and it was really thought to become a payment option for the customer, and then it became so much more. And I'll tell you
Right.
where I think you're right, and I don't want to give away any competitive advantage. I heard somebody say one time, if you got an idea, you need to keep it to yourself, move slow, move quiet. But I'm going to give you an idea, and I think I've mentioned it on the podcast before. And I just had a 2 hour long conversation with somebody yesterday on this, and I'm curious your thoughts, so I can shut up. And it's hard to, because the things you're discussing are so close to our world. We thought about going just direct to consumer, and we may still, as a rent-to-own provider. And how do we accomplish that? By going direct to, because, and you say, why direct consumer? What do you mean? Well, right now I have to go to the manufacturer to suggest they use our rent-to-own services. Theoretically, because the rent-to-own, or because the manufacturer owns the inventory, they would make the decision on what rent-to-own company, or even multiple rent-to-own companies they use, assuming that they're not tied to the inventory, assuming they have some kind of autonomy where they can make their own choices, right? And choose which rent-to-own provider they want. Some just give that option away to their dealer network. Some dealer networks actually purchase wholesale, so of course they can choose their own because they own their own product. Some don't even know what they can offer and what they can't. They're not sure when they're an employee and when they're an independent contractor. It's mind-boggling.
Hello, shed sellers. Let's take a moment to discuss the shed customer and meeting their expectations. I remember growing up in the neighborhood where a certain percentage of the houses had well-manicured lawns and well-manicured homes. These were the type of individuals who felt it was important to purchase a well-constructed home or vehicle, or maybe equipment to help maintain the quality of the item. As shed manufacturers, we seek to provide a well-built quality shed. We want the customer to feel satisfied that their hard-earned money has been well spent on a product that will last. At LuxGuard, we believe adding high-quality rubber flooring to your line of sheds makes sense to the customer and adds value the customer can appreciate. With each year, sheds are becoming more complex. The customizations we are seeing are virtually endless. LuxGuard not only gives a complimentary aesthetic appearance for their shed, but also protects the floor from spills and keeps cleanup simple. Offer your customer the customer service they seek with LuxGuard. At LuxGuard, we are committed to delivering exceptional customer service and innovative products to help our customers achieve their goals. We strive to meet the evolving needs of the customers. To speak with one of our ready-to-serve customer product specialists, simply call 336-468-4311. To see our product and view an installation video, just visit our website at luxguard.com. LuxGuard, the floor that lasts a lifetime.
If I go direct to consumer, and let's say they come into better buildings, I'm going to use you as the example. I'm going to use you as the guinea pig here today.
Sure.
Let's say that I go and find someone in Pauls Valley, Oklahoma, who wants to come in and buy a shed, and they have a voucher. And they walk in today and they say, hey, we've been pre-approved already. We just need to buy a shed. We've been visiting shed lots already. Shed Geek Rentals is going to go ahead and take care of purchasing the shed from you today. What would Vance say, knowing that he does an internal rent-to-own? I found the customer. I sent them out shopping, and they came to your place to purchase a shed. And they're going to get a rent-to-own contract because we've already pre-approved them. We're going to send you the check directly. What say you, Vance, to that customer?
Today, I'm not sure. That's a very interesting concept. I'll draw an interesting parallel. I have a meeting set up this Friday. I told you we build a lot of metal buildings. We actually do some turnkey barn dominiums occasionally.
Nice.
I've got
Nice.
a gentleman coming in to finalize a contract with. I'll sit in on the meeting with my project manager. He and I have completed a budget. It's ready to go, and their bank has sent them in pre-approved, if you will, quote unquote. Although really the bank didn't send them. They just went to the bank and said, "Hey, look, we're wanting to build a 3,200 square foot home, and here's what we think the budget might be, and we want to apply for this, and we've got 20 acres, and let's do this." They come to me with check in hand, very similar to what you're describing as a rent to own, which ties back again to what I said when we started this conversation. I really think the whole concept of rent to own was born out of a need for financing. Not saying it doesn't have a place. I just think as the financing part of it matures further, you will see the rent to own piece of the market shrink at some point. What that does to the industry, how impactful that is to manufacturers, I don't know what the timeline is on that, but I suspect that the market will balance itself out in that respect at some point.
I agree. And that's, it's part of why we took on partnering with a finance company within the last years, because it seems like the natural progression, at some point. And that just depends on when banks become competitive in our space. Because the one thing I've noticed in the last 10 years, you take a look at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and, bankers are having a hard time recovering their assets for secured loans of $600,000 homes.
Correct.
It's really hard for them to jump into a high risk unsecured loan like a shed that they don't know anything about.
Right.
There's $7,000. They're like, I'm not interested. Who wants
Right.
to, I can't recover my 600,000 times what, 200 that I've got out there. Do I want to recover 7,000 times 7,000? I don't know. It's like so the bank hasn't really responded to it as a mature business, to use your words, yet, but there are some, and I think it will become more competitive. This is something I said yesterday, and I think you'll agree with me on this. If a customer came in with a pre-approved letter from a bank and wanted to purchase a shed from you today, you wouldn't think anything about it.
Oh, and no, we do it all the time.
And I don't think any manufacturer out there would think anything about it, because they know it's a bank. The bank wants their money. It's real easy. But if the same customer came in with a pre-approved rent-to-own voucher, I believe there are manufacturers who would encourage their dealers not to sell that shed because they couldn't get the rent-to-own on it, or they would attempt to talk the customer into it. Correct. Mind you, they didn't find the lead, but they want to gather the opportunity to sell. And that right there tells me something very interesting.
Absolutely. Well, even your take on it, and even your tone, we could debate this for some time probably. And you said we had a time limit, so I won't drag this on. But the very your intonation with your wording here is that the manufacturer should honor what the rent-to-own company has done. So it kind of goes back to what I have said a couple of times. The rent-to-own has become a huge driver of the industry, even more so than the manufacturer, more so than the sales lot, and more so than the haulers, all of whom I respect. And quite frankly, most of whom I really wanted to be 20 years ago when we started into the industry. So very, very interesting concept behind all that.
It is. It really is. And I agree with you that it's very influential, to the point where rent-own companies are choosing to own the vertical, I would say, by just buying the manufacturer out.
Well, if simple case study, probably most of you that are listening to this podcast, or at least a large percentage of you, had representation at the Shed Show in Michigan this year. Who was the star of the show at Michigan? Roll back in your mind. Who had the two biggest booths?
Surely
and the second, third one down.
Vance. I'm just kidding.
Obviously. Well,
I'm just kidding.
Look at the real estate. The three largest booths were owned by rent-to-own companies at the Shed Show.
I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't notice.
Roll back in your mind, and you'll know. I won't call names. I have friends in all three camps.
Good.
But
Something we don't want to do here.
The
Yeah.
three largest vendors, other than Cardinal, Cardinal was a huge competitor, but
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thought. I have to be careful because I gain enemies real quick whenever
yeah,
I mention names. And look, I believe in difficult conversation. I mean, I even, hey, I open the floor for those companies to come on and defend their position should they choose to. You know what I mean? Because I
sure.
think it makes for good conversation. But all it does is really prove your point, if that's true, that you're attempting to go bigger, to do more. I mean, we've done different things. Rent to own is a small portion. Look, we're small potatoes in comparison, and we had some great opportunities. We had exclusivity options with some very large rent to own providers that we didn't take. And I actually instead chose to work with a very small company that had been in business for years. That was, I don't mind saying, I think they'll admit this, was shrinking because they weren't really growing their network in that opportunity. And they were attempting to figure it out. And we just happened to have a platform where we could do that. And guess what? Because we were advertising was very abrasive for us, we could occupy these spaces where we were making people hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars through coming on the podcast or to advertising. That's not to say everyone sees the same result. Some people come on here, they advertise, and people don't buy their product, and they say, "We didn't have no luck. Your podcast sucks." And I say, "Well, I don't know. Maybe it's not me. Maybe it's your product, your message, or something along those lines." That's not always true. I'm being honest. Some guys have made tons of money, from being on here, and you say, "Well, what influence does that hold?" I hope that it holds the influence to do the right thing, is what I hope. And sometimes that means the right thing for myself, for my family. Like, we can't operate this thing for free. We have 4 full-time employees doing a ton of stuff that people don't see. And while I'd love to be able to just be a charitable event, like, we have to make money like everyone. It's just the same as the church asks for tithing, because there's a certain dollar element that's necessary in order for it to pay its bills. We do too. But we try to live modest, and we live publicly. We're transparent for anybody who wants to visit us or see us or know what we do.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of a 2-part series. Be sure to tune in next week for more engaging conversation here at the Shed Geek Podcast.
Hey, this is Mo Lunsford in sunny Union Grove, North Carolina, and we want to say thank you to all the guests and listeners.